Hello everyone, welcome to this monthly webinar. My name is Evan Kaufman. As you know, as we're letting people load in here because we've had a good number of registrants for this one. We host a monthly webinar, typically on the third Thursday of every month. We kick it off with the VA Loan Masterclass every month, which Spencer, my assistant, helped run for us just a minute ago. And then we always do our unique one at the bottom of the hour for us. And this month's a little bit of a unique one, or I should say it's a brand new one for us. It's a twist on our usual buy versus rent kind of discussion. And that is how will we buy in a high cost living area. We know a lot of folks are PCSing right now. We're in the middle of that season. Our business is primarily active duty military. It's about 70% of our clients, which is very, very unique. And some of those places that we go are high cost of living areas. So we have a nice picture on the screen here you see of DC, going to LA, like LA Air Force Base, headed out to California down in San Diego. Some nice locations that there are, but they're generally expensive. And sometimes people struggle with is, hey, how do I handle buying there? How do I consider buying in that area? What should I think about? So we're going to hit on that today. Let's start getting into our slides about WeVet for us. We are really two companies as a brand effectively. And the brand is really, the whole goal of it is to help military members purchase homes at their next locations. We like to say we're all about active duty military home ownership. And we offer that through WeVet Home Loans, which is the company that I run that focuses heavily on VA loans and serving members for VA loans specifically. And then we also have WeVet Realty that is run by a separate team that helps connect military families with military focused real estate agents, and they do a wonderful job with their work. You can use us separately, use us together, however you like. The goal is, again, to help improve active duty military home ownership. If you're a veteran, though, don't worry. I am too. Most of our team is. We can help take care of you still as well. That's pretty much the other 30% of the business that we work for. Let's go next slide for us in. Background on me. This really just nicely says, hey, we do a lot of VA loans. I've personally done a lot of VA loans. Now I do a lot of education on VA loans and helping clients utilize it as they're moving PCSing active duty or just using it when they're out all around the country. There's a nice photo. I always say, hey, we host an annual tailgate. It's usually at the Air Force Academy versus Navy or versus Army football game each year in Colorado. Anyone's always more than welcome to come to that. This coming year will be our 5th or 6th year for it. It's an absolute blast. That's me loving it. It's the second favorite day of the year behind my anniversary with my wife, because I think I have to say that. So let's roll into the next slide for us. The roadmap for today, because I think everyone that we had on board is on board now. The roadmap we're going to go over for this discussion of should you buy in a high priced area, we're going to look at high price market considerations, touching on similar things that we have from some of our other presentations, talk about personal considerations for if you're purchasing in those high cost areas, what do you need to consider personally? We'll touch on simple timing recommendation. This comes from our general buy versus rent decision making. We have our timing recommendation. It's all over our site. If you ever talk with me or anyone on the team, we talk about it often in mortgage. But then we'll get into the details of utilizing a buy versus rent calculator, something we just rolled out that's really cool. And we'll even pull it up and we're going to go through it. That's going to be a first for us. It's going to be exciting. You're going to see if I completely slip on using it or we have some technical difficulties, but I'm betting we're going to get it right. We'll talk about some VA loan strategy and wrap it all out with any live Q&As that we put in the session, or I'll follow up with you if you put them down in the chat. Let's go into first that high price consideration. So what is a high price market? The features of a high price market are generally the prices are higher relative to the national averages. Again, for a lot of our military families that we focus around usually in these presentations, your San Diego, your LA, there's down like Homestead, you're talking Miami, there's a couple small places down there that folks are PCSing too. Washington, D.C. is probably the big dog going around there. Even Denver for some spots, because you got Colorado Springs, it's getting more expensive, but you have Denver because you got a couple of bases and installations up there as well. It's getting more high price. Those are your high price areas, elevated price. The national average purchase price is like around $400,000. These areas, it might be $500,000, $600,000, $700,000, even $800,000. Now, they're typically areas that experience high level of population growth, income growth, or both. They also are areas where BAH might not match up with the market rents or your mortgage payments. And that's what sometimes makes it kind of scary. So we want to make sure we're making good educated decisions. Then you'll also typically see greater competition and tighter inventory. And that's just because there's so many people moving in and out of these areas. And again, if it's experiencing population growth or income growth, people are either trading up their homes or they're moving in and moving back out. But if the population's growing, there were only 10 homes last year. Now there's 11 people in the city. There's constantly going to be a fight for homes. So it often feels really quick and rushed. So again, the whole goal of this is, hey, how going into these areas, Hawaii, I should say too, right? Hawaii. hey, how do I go into these areas with a little bit less stress, or how can I start preparing for it ahead of time? Now, other considerations for high price market areas to start thinking about. This tags from our other discussion again on buy versus rent. You want to make sure that you most likely have a desire to own that home for a longer period of time. As we touch on our timing consideration here, in most of these areas, you want to go into it with a little more long-term mindset, and I'll touch on why here in a minute. Now, the other pieces too, in our typical buy versus rent, we talk about some major market considerations just to say, hey, is this a good area to buy, or is it a better area to maybe rent? One of those is just the market, or the market you're moving to, and how it's doing from a few key things. That's the population growth or the income growth that we kind of touched on, because usually high-priced areas have that, but you want to look at the growth of the area you're moving into. You want to make sure it's ideally growing or at least staying the same, because shrinking communities can be dangerous. Hey, there's 10 homes and 10 people in it. The next year there's 10 homes and only 9 people. Well, now if you try to sell your home, well, there's vacancy out there. That means it might be harder to sell. So you just want to make sure that if you're going to one of these areas to buy, it's stabilized in population or growing. Again, this is stuff from our normal buy versus rent discussion, but those all hold true still. School districts have a big impact on home values. And so you want to take into consideration, hey, do I need that school district or not? Because that might have a major impact on our values. And then lastly, job considerations we like to talk about. Hey, are there certain employers in the area? Do I feel they're still going to be there in another 5-10 years or not? Is there one major employer we're banking on, or is there a big diversification of employers? That's some of the pieces you want to consider just in general. Hey, should I buy in this area, period? Typically, the high-priced areas that we're dealing with, the DCs, the San Diegos, etc., they meet most all those metrics for everything. There's growth in either population or income, and there's jobs that are generally diversified because the cities are generally very large for the most part. There are some of those niche areas that are small cities that have high prices, but for the larger ones, generally all those characteristics or most of those are there. So that usually puts us in that buy category unless it just seems too expensive, which let's start touching on that next. We'll go to the personal considerations. This is where when you're going to a high-priced area, sometimes we're dealing with a couple of them right now where I was like, man, I just have to buy. I can't even decide on renting. Why? Can be large families. We have folks, if you have a very large family, rentals, the most common rental out there is, depending on the market you're in, it's either going to be a 3-bed, 2-bath home or a 2-bath, or a 2-bed, 1-bath home. That's what you typically see, a 2 or a 3-bed. It becomes more and more uncommon to see 4 bedrooms, 5-bedroom homes. So if you need 5, 6, 7 bedrooms, it gets really hard. Sometimes that might force you in it. Pets is another example. I got one German Shepherd, and I know that even then it was hard to get a rental when I was younger. So if we had 3 German Shepherds, which we have had clients in the past who've had 2 or 3 dogs of certain breeds that people just don't want to rent to, and it's not uncommon, especially in larger cities, to even allow pets or get an extra charge for it, that can just make renting close to impossible or harder to do. And then there's just general specific needs, right? ADA needs. We've seen clients who have that. Hey, the rentals, just trying to get that set up. It's hard to get together, especially quickly, but if I own it, I can change it how I want. Personal preferences with the yards, those kinds of things. So you want to make sure, hey, even if numbers might not make sense, if I have personal considerations that matter more, then all right, Evan, please show me how I can make sure this is a good decision, or make sure that this buying is going to be optimized for me. The other major considerations or questions you want to ask yourself is, are you willing to rent the property out over the long run? Because that can impact this decision for buying versus renting, especially even in high cost areas. The same as our normal buy versus rent recommendation. If you plan on owning the home, which we'll talk about in our timing recommendation here, for a certain amount of time, then hey, you might want to consider buying. And if you want to consider it, then look into more detail, which we're going to show you through the buy versus rent calculator. But if you're going to own or rent that home out potentially, that can help your cause for buying potentially, because even if you get short-term orders, your active duty, get short orders to move away real quick, hey, if you know you're going to rent it out most likely, then you at least know you got a little more flexibility there in the purchase because you're going to own that home for longer, which is generally better. Do you want to move back to the area for the long term? We deal with folks who often might move to somewhere like, I like to use Washington, D.C. We'll even probably use it for the example here, that you go there for an assignment and you're like, hey, I know I'm coming. I came here in my 8th year of duty. I know I'm coming back here probably for one of the last ones, or there's a good chance. And then, hey, I might want to even retire here because there's so many jobs, etc. for it. So I'm going to get this home now, even if I'm only in it for 3, 4, 5 years, and then I'm going to come back around and probably live in it for another bout. So you want to think that part through up front, because that can sometimes help make that buy versus rent decision a little bit easier. Now let's get into, though, that timing recommendation. This is again from our buy versus rent decision that we have, which is kind of like the blanket, hey, you're PCS and you're making the move, should I buy or should I rent? And it applies too to not just PCSing for active duty, but anyone. Hey, I'm going to move to a new area, should I buy or should I rent? In the most basic level, we've boiled down. If you don't want to deal with all the math and thinking through everything, we've boiled it down to a very basic timing recommendation, because we got to do this all the time for our active duty families. Hey, I'm in orders. What should I do? And we like to think we'll give the most honest opinion possible, because we know that oftentimes for especially like lenders, if you don't buy, we don't win. But for us, our clients are with us for life. We're helping folks on their third and even fourth PCS. So if we mess this one up, we might not get the next one. So a basic recommendation we have is, will you own the home for at least 3 years? Longer is always better too, by the way. To be very clear, it'd be ideal if you know you're going to own it for 4, 5, 6 plus years. But are you going to own it for at least 3 years? And own doesn't mean live in it. Own means you might live in it and then you might rent it out, for example, too. That's you owning the home still. Why is that important to think through? Because if you've owned the home for at least 3 years, you typically, in most scenarios, and we'll even show you through our calculator here, you've paid down the mortgage enough and ideally gotten a little bit of appreciation, not extreme, but a little bit of appreciation on the home itself, to where you've at least broke even or even possibly come out ahead some when after that 3-year period. And again, longer is better. The longer you go, the more you mitigate any potential market fluctuations or any losses of any kind. That's where that 3-year comes from. Because at that 3-year mark, you're typically getting to where you're recouping costs. And once you factor in the cost to sell and you factor in what you might have saved if you had rented, etc., that's where you want to be. If you're under 3 years, just know there's a higher potential, I should say, not a guarantee or a different type. There's also a potential you could be under if it's 4 or 5 years too, but that 3-year mark's usually where you start to see that tipping point, and the longer the better. So the pros, it's a basic metric to utilize for trying to make this decision. It has a proven record of success, meaning we run the numbers for it. It's pretty legitimate in how it shapes out. We can show you through this buy versus rent calculator how that kind of comes to be. But the cons of it is that it can sometimes underestimate, or it's understated for high cost areas, because if high cost areas have larger appreciation, sometimes they do, the 3-year metric kind of understates, as the second con is, the power of appreciation. The thing with appreciation, though, is that it can be hit or miss too. The last few years, we've seen some years with wild appreciation in markets, 5, 10%, really high. Historically, it's not the norm. And is there a possibility that prices could ever go down? There is. It's very rare, and it's typically very select markets, but it's possible too that could happen. So it underestimates the power of appreciation, or if you have more appreciation by some chance, then it might say, hey, it's going to take longer for you to break even on buying. And so you want to just make sure the area you're going to, you have some idea of what that might look like, or you using a number that you're comfortable with knowing, hey, I factored for that well. So that's sometimes a con of it. It's just not as detailed, right? Because it's very simple. It's just saying, hey, am I going to own it for 3 years? Longer is better. Now, how can we get more detailed on this? That's where we're going on our next slide. And this is big of where we get into the crux of, I'm moving to a high cost area. We talked about some of the things you got to consider. The classics, the growth of the area. Do I have the growth of the area, the employers, school districts, etc.? I've now taken my personal considerations. Maybe I have some personal considerations of where, man, I can't even consider renting. Or, I'm not going to consider buying for some personal reasons. Maybe you have some of those too. But oftentimes we'll see the classic dog, large family, or some other unique need they need for the home that forces you into buying. So then it's like, oh no, how do I make sure that I'm not going to be behind on this, or that I'm not way off on buying versus renting? Well, we've created a buy versus rent calculator that really helps us. The basics of the military buy versus rent calculator was built to really help us provide a more comprehensive option versus for the timing recommendation. Because we have some people who are like, well, Evan, I want to see a little bit more and get a little more detail. And when you look out there, we could never find anything that integrates military basic allowance for housing, the military lifestyle, with a true buy versus rent calculator. Number one, there's not many buy versus rent calculators out there, period. But to integrate it with the military lifestyle and helping make that decision on military home ownership, it just wasn't out there. So we built one, like a lot of tools that we've made. We just made them. We're the only ones out there with the military mortgage calculator, which will roll in BAH with an actual mortgage calculator. We have one of the best BAH calculators out there. Why? Because we build it specific for our types of folks. That's why it's used often and in the top of Google typically. So we love making those niche, unique tools that help our active duty community continue to improve their abilities at home ownership. This is going to, I think, be one of those big ones for us. Or I should say a big one for the people who want to go deeper on trying to make that buy versus rent decision. So for high cost scenarios when we're using this calculator, and I'm about to pull it up here and we're about to go rogue, we're about to go off screen. We're going to see how this one works. There's a few major considerations we got to have. One, you got to make sure you're comparing similar homes for the style of rent. The big things, square footage, beds, number of beds and baths, the style of the home, and the age all play a major difference in the impact on comparing homes. And I'll show you what I mean. Because one thing that you can go astray on this buy versus rent calculator is you're comparing a 2-bedroom, 1-bath rental to buying a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house. Then you're going to get an outcome that isn't technically accurate. You need to make sure you compare apples to apples, and I'll show you how to do that. Next, you want to make sure you account for the insurance and tax difference in that area, and I'll show you how you can get a basic idea of how to do that within the calculator. Then you want to make sure you run a few scenarios based on different appreciation styles, because as I mentioned, the high cost areas especially, they deal with appreciation differently than most other areas in the country. They might see higher rates of appreciation and then have times where it slows down or even goes negative potentially more than others. So you can have some more wild swings that you might want to pay attention to, but you can play with those numbers in the calculator as we're about to show. So here we go. Let's strap on our helmets, so to say, and let's go rogue for a minute and see if we can share the screen. I'm going to take us literally through a scenario, pulling it up on the internet, and we're going to see if this really is as easy as it's been that I've been using it the last couple weeks since we rolled it out. Let's see if we can do it just live in person and show you how fast and well it can work. So Matt, let's pull it up. All right, cool. We got a couple Google tabs here. What we're going to do, showing you, we're really going from the start. You can go Weave buy versus rent calculator. Let's see if this bad boy's already, oh, look at that. It's already popping up. Wonderful. See some cool videos for us. Sometimes we get those AI deals. That's been really good for us lately, by the way, because all our stuff that we put out, I mean, it's original, it's real stuff. So AI's apparently been liking it. All right. So the calculator, here she is. The beauty of this calculator is that it looks like it takes in a lot of information. It does. So you can make it very complex or very simple how you'd like it. But notice right out the gate, it's integrating our military experience out the gate. So it's taking into consideration the pay grade so we can pull BAH because that factors into, hey, are we saving extra money or not saving money on this deal? Now you can use this without being military too and just leaving it blank. But let's say we got two scenarios I was wanting to go over. We're going to go over a single family one and a townhome example. And so we'll go over what I wrote down here. The goal is, let's say we're going to go over let's go to DC like what we were talking about. And let's say we're going major that's doing a midterm assignment, right, to go to DC to do some staff position. Classic right there. With dependents, 04, and we're headed to, just because we've done a couple in this area even already, we're going to Manassas, Virginia. So right outside DC. Very common town that we've helped people purchase in. I know some folks really closely that have lived there, and if you not as close, it's just a common spot, and you can usually get to most places, and you can get a nice size home there too if you like. But it's in that high cost area with higher county loan limit levels, all that good stuff. So there it pulls up our BAH rate. Now the other one thing we want to do, because now we're going to factor in what it would be to rent there versus what it would be to buy there. How do we do that? Well, if we pull up, let's say, homes for sale, Manassas, VA. Let's say that. And we just go right into, let's go to Zillow. Zillow has a nice way, what I like about it on occasion, sometimes it can be off on its values for stuff, but what's nice is that you can click this little button over here where it's for sale or for rent, and they actually have a good number of rentals. So this allows us to get to where we can compare apples to apples a little bit better, and you'll see what I mean. So let's go ahead and zoom on in here. Here we are. All right, so we're going to go into this zone. And let's say this first example that we're going to do is we're going to look for homes for sale. And remember, we want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So if you're like, oh man, I want to move my family into town, right? We're a major 04 coming in, and I want to buy this home in town. Well, let's say you got your family and you're wanting to make sure it's at least a 4-bedroom home and it's got at least 2 bathrooms. So we want to make sure that we select for that, but we want to make sure we're not looking at rents of townhomes and we're looking at purchase prices of big houses. So what we can do is we can say, all right, we're going to do 4-bed, 2-bath. We're actually going to swap over to for rent, and watch this too. Here's one of those considerations. Notice how it dropped super low for rent. So if I apply it, there's only a few here. But then if I start clicking, I'm like, oh, cool, I can rent a home there for $2,700. Wait, that's a townhome and it's only 1,200 square feet. That's not quite right. I said I wanted a big house for my family. So let's go over here and change the square footage, and let's say minimum 2,500 square feet. So if I say minimum 2,500 square feet, ooh, look, there's not many there. This goes back to those considerations. There's just not much for rent. So this might all of a sudden start pushing you to have to buy anyways. But look in the corner here. I see one. Nice. We can go with this. So we can start working off of one down here. Oh, there's two that it's popping us up. That's a plus. And we want to make sure a home type for it. Let's take out apartments and let's take out townhomes. We already know those are out because there aren't any for rent. So right now we know that, hey, a 4-bed, 2-bath home with at least 2,500 square feet, that house I want, and it's a house. We made it a house type. There's 2 for rent right now, $4,500. Look at that. Okay, that's a nice home. You can click through and just take a picture of it. Okay, cool. 4-bed, 3,400 square feet, 4-bed, 2-bath. This one over here, 3,300 square feet. It's 5-bed, a little bit bigger for it. Cool. That's a nice one. Is there anywhere else something? Anywhere? Okay, look at that. Cool. Here's another one. It's a little out of the way. You ideally want them in the same area, but here's 4,000. You look at that one so you can see what it looks like. All right, a little bit smaller for it. 2,500 square feet, 4-bed, 2.5 bath, 4,000. Cool. So very just gut guess here. If I want to be around 2,500 square feet or a little bigger, 4 bedrooms, I'm probably getting something for rent somewhere between $4,000 and $5,000. So we know for rent, I could probably consider, let's just say 40, like in the middle, 4,250. 4,250 for a home around that size. So you go back to your calculator and be like, all right, hey, monthly rent for the style of home I want. Because I look at those homes, I'm like, well, that's what I want. I want a house with 2,500 plus square feet that my dog can go run in or whatnot. So that's why I know if I'm going to rent, it's going to be probably somewhere around 4,250. I think it's pretty reasonable based on what we saw. Now it puts in here automatically a appreciation of rent too, because rent does go up. We put 3% in there. You can change that to whatever you want. Let's just assume it's kind of that average of 3% a year. You're going to need a security deposit. Generally it's around 1 month. So put that in there. Then there's renter's insurance. I mean, we'll see that maybe it'd be $20-$30 for like the townhomes. For I don't know exactly what we go with for a single family. Maybe it's closer to like $50 a month, but let's say a little less, $40 a month, 480, let's say. And that's because renter's insurance oftentimes will be required to have that for renting a property. So we'll just use a reasonable $40 a month on that one. Then let's go into buy side. So we got our rent part set up for this calculator. Now we want to go buy. You've already set it up in here. So then you literally just click the button and go to for sale. So now we can see and apply what's for sale in that area. Well, we got a nice home. Look at that. What's this one? Well, that's a big dog. That's 5-bed, 5 baths, and 4,100 square feet. The others were, I think, like 3,500, right, Matt? So we're a little bit big there. So 839 might be on the higher side. Ooh, 1.3 million. Consider that one there. Well, that's 46. That's huge. So we aren't not using that. Let's go over here, a little bit different neighborhood for it. There weren't any rentals there, but let's see. I mean, so maybe a little more comparable to that last one we saw. There's a big house, right? 750 for us. Here's a 699. 699 home, 3,000 square feet for us. 6 beds though, which makes it, here's a 689, 2,600, right? So I would say we go in that range, something like 700 to 750 is probably a right viewpoint for us. Something along those lines. So let's just say $750,000 on it. Then we'll set our interest rate. I can tell you for quoting folks recently, your scenario might be different, but we've been around 5.75. This will auto default to that 6.25. We'll adjust it occasionally, but note that it's all based on your situation and stuff. I know that we've been around that range between the mid 5s to low 6s lately. So we'll go 5.75. If you're wondering what that fee is, the VA funding fee, you can just hover over it so you can see what it is. This assumes my first use was 0% down. Now I put how long we're going to live in that home. Let's assume I'm heading there for an assignment that I think is going to be now, a lot of them we're getting from folks for 4 years. Probably going to be between 2 and 6, right? For a lot of folks, or 2 and 7. Now you have some advanced options you can go through. You can come in here, and this is one that's important for the area you're going to because these are set and you got to adjust them. The big one is going to be property insurance and homeowners insurance. You can get some idea of that when you're on here. So let's go grab that one we went with 750. Here's one for 750. That's actually is nicer, I'd say, than those other homes we were looking at for rent. But okay, we'll use it still. 750. You can scroll down and you can get a gauge on what taxes were on a property. So 7,600 on a $760,000 home right there is what I saw for us. You probably just saw it too. It moved it around on us. Where'd you go? Where are you? There you are. Property taxes, right? Zillow does a decent job of pulling the previous year taxes. Not bad for it. So around 1%. We default to 1.1%, so that's not that far off. And then sometimes you just might want to do a double check and check another home right nearby. Here's another one at 700,000, and its taxes came in, let's see, at a similar clip probably for our sake. It came in at, so a little over 1%. So we'll stick with the 1.1% that we have in there. Note that some areas in the country, this could be as low as 0.5% or lower even. And then for some areas of the country, it's higher. It's closer to 1.5%. So we'll have 1.1. We're going to assume some home appreciation. Remember, these high-cost areas typically can see appreciation outpace other areas, but it's not always a fact. So we'll leave it with that common 3% figure that we see in a lot of spots, or like more generally across the country. Then the selling costs, we'll assume 6% on this. That can be anywhere from 5 to 8%, depending on real estate agent fees, if you have any closing costs, that kind of stuff. Let's just assume that because this factors in, oh, hey, you're going to own the home for 4 years, and down the road, when you sell it, we need to factor for those selling costs. So we'll put that in there. Homeowners insurance. You can either ask your agent or someone you're working with for that. Zillow has numbers, but it's not always that accurate. I will say that that's probably the thing that's off the most common that we deal with. But let's say it's $2,400 for us. And there's no HOA that we saw for that. And home maintenance is already factored in there, 1%. On a $700,000 home would say, hey, you might spend $7,000 a year on maintenance. That might be high, but it also might not if you have something break. So we'll just leave it in there for that sake. Now, this goes into more detail if you want. You can factor in opportunity costs, meaning like, hey, if you took this down payment and invested it, here's what it could turn into, and it'll factor that in. But we're not going to go that detailed right now. Just know that's there if you want to go down an even further rabbit hole than the advanced options we already have. But here's the cool thing. Again, this is taking it and getting us more granular. Because remember, timing recommendation works out real well for a lot of basic areas. Typically, we're a little more elevated in high-cost areas, but it might not be as crazy as we think. And I'm running all these by just, hey, running off the whim of what we have. Like we just literally pulled it up out of the blue. So look at this. We ran it. You're there for 4 years, and it pops up and says, hey, renting wins. But notice it's pretty close because check this out. The break-even period is 4 years and 5 months. So remember, our 3-year recommendation, even in a high-cost area, is getting closer than we think there. But it's higher. It's a little bit higher, as we always say, as we know for those areas. It can be 4.5 years. So now we know, all right, hey, if I'm going to own this home for at least 4.5 years, that's where that break-even point comes between buying versus renting. And how you can get that gauge is I put 4 years here. So watch, for example, I change this to 5 years. And I calculate it, and voila, all of a sudden buying makes sense. Why? Because 4.5 years is the break-even. You're going to own it for 5. Let's say we purchased one of those homes that was the same size that we saw, that was closer to 700,000. This is where it's cool. You can run these in here. Oh no. Let's say you're going to look at that home for 700,000 instead of the one for 750, for example, right? Now you can see that that break-even period is going to drop to 3 years and 9 months. So ideally, this helps give you an idea. And when you run it in a lot of areas, it's around that 3-year mark. High-cost areas are typically higher, as we've kind of already been discussing, but it's maybe not as wild out as you think. It might be 4 or 5 years for break-even periods. This example, we're around that 4-year mark for breaking even, give or take, depending on your price. Let's just do another quick one and say, hey, I'm going to be moving to a townhome. Easy change up. I'm a E7 with kids too, moving to a townhome. So if I come back here, we'll just use the same area for our sake. Thought that part through. And let's say we're going to change it up to a townhome. This townhome, though, is going to be 3 beds. Should I do 2 still as well? I'm trying to think if I did that before also. We'll just leave it 3 bed, 2 baths. And then we're going to say townhomes. We're going to throw out Multis, we're going to throw out the houses so those don't get in the way. Throw out the lots, throw out the manufactured stuff. We'll apply that. It's still low because it's a lot of square footage, especially for that area. So let's drop our square footage to like 1,500 square feet. That gave us a lot more options. Okay, so now looking at it, I see a lot of homes. For time's sake, you're looking at it pretty quick. You see a bunch of 5s. Over here you got some 4s, 530, 620s, a 445. We got, and over here you can just scale through quick, 4s, 525, 499, 475. That kind of range, 475, 445, 550. So we're kind of around that 5 give or take-ish mark for it. And then if we flip quick over to for rent, right, let's see here. For rent, we're at 3 to 3.6 kind of range for looking at it effectively, right? So we're a little bit higher on all those. So let's go over here real quick and do that change up for us. So for rent, we know it's like 3 to 3.6, let's say 3,300 for that kind of range and price. We know it'd be a similar deal here for 3,300. Renter's insurance might be a little bit less in those areas, let's say $30 a month, something like that. And then your purchase price, though, we were ish around the kind of that 500. 500 was like 435, I think, on the low and low 5s on the end. So I'd say 500, somewhere around 500. Let's say 495. I think it's actually the price that we saw on one of those. Yeah, woohoo, make it slight difference. You're gonna be there for the 5 years, let's say. Again, for it, we can always swap that around. Selling costs being the same, we know that's right. Our HOA or our annual homeowners insurance is gonna be less, probably gonna be closer to let's say 1,600 for this sake. There are HOAs often on these, so there are often HOAs on these that you can tell by going for sale. And remember too, if you have a pet, you might want to factor in if there's $100 or $200 a month fee or something for the pets, right? So for this one, we can hop in here, $127 a month HOA on that guy. And I don't know, what's HOA on this guy too? Let's see what we're dealing with. That's a big dog for that. Brand new dude. For its sake. Interesting. New builds. That's one thing you want to watch. What are those HOAs? Here's another one, older one. 125. Okay. We'll go with that. 127. So it shows you may really want to pay attention if those have those, because the townhomes often will. Then we go ahead and let's run that bad boy. We adjusted the rents. We can see what it is. Look at that. Break-even period, 3.3 years. Starts to make sense to purchase. So on those style of homes, it's actually a little bit better than the single-family houses, which doesn't surprise me necessarily as much. Usually when it's a little bit lower value, buying can often come out ahead sooner when they're more affordable properties in a market area. So now, hey, I'm an E7 with kids and I'm headed there. Cool, 3 years, break even. So you can see where all of a sudden our 3-year rule, again, most areas it makes sense. These high cost areas can be a little more elevated, and you can get more granular if you want by using this buy versus rent calculator. And for high cost areas, it can be really helpful. The big thing is comparing apples to apples as much as possible, making sure you're factoring for that HOA, updating that insurance number, and then you're looking at the same style of home for rent versus buy. And the power of this calculator is really cool to kick out, hey, does this make sense or not? So let's go back to the main slide. Matt, hopefully that helped. Good detour. I like it. Lived up to the expectations, I would say, of where in a lot of these high cost areas, we might be slightly elevated above that time and recommendation. That's why we have those cons and explanation of it. But it's not as crazy as necessarily sometimes we think. And it's even sometimes close to that 3-year, which I was kind of shocked that one was as low as it was. But when you're moving to those locations, it can be important to use that kind of calculator to help us make those decisions. Let's now look, though, moving forward a bit, on the VA loan strategy. Because if you're like, all right, Evan, I get that, cool, I can get more comfortable if I should buy or if I should rent, but the VA loan I'm using, what are some pitfalls that could happen and come from that? Because a lot of us watching this will most likely ultimately use a VA loan if you're active duty or you're a veteran. Now, no, on VA loans, there's a potential loan limits for using the VA loan. If you have no outstanding VA loans, then you could go 0% down to just about any amount you want. We've helped folks with multi-million dollar homes, 0% down. But they had no outstanding VA loans, or they were selling the VA loans they currently had and going to have them freed up by the time they purchase this next one. However, if you plan on keeping an outstanding VA loan, county loan limits kick in. You can go utilize a WeVet county loan limit calculator. We got that out there too. You literally Google it. That'll pop up for us. In these high cost of areas, some people will just go use a regular calculator and say, oh, hey, the county loan limit in 2026, where we are right now, the typical limit is going to be 832,000 some change right now. Well, if you go to high cost areas, oftentimes it's higher. It could be all the way up to $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million on the county loan limit for the area. So you might go to one calculator and type in things and be like, oh man, I don't have enough eligibility. Because if you go beyond the county loan limit, if you're keeping an old VA loan, you can still use a VA loan. You just have to bring a down payment. But if you didn't type in the right calculator and get the adjusted increased amount for a high cost area, know that those high cost areas have higher limits, which gives you a little more expanded, what I like to call 0% down eligibility. So using that calculator can help you with that. The basic rough math on it, and this is where we as lenders can help run that for you, we're working for you, is that if, let's say your original VA loan on the loan you're keeping, the original amount on your certificate of eligibility says it was $300,000. Again, rough math, you got to divide it by 4 and do some other calculations, but very basic. Let's say it was $300,000. You're moving to somewhere with a county loan limit now of $1.28 million, which is the high cost areas for it. Basic math is you would take that county loan limit you're moving to minus the original loan balance, not the current, the original of the loan you're keeping, and that's effectively your 0% down eligibility. So in that case, 1.28 million minus 300,000, you got around $980,000 of 0% down eligibility remaining. Now, if you're going to a regular county, most counties in the country, it might only be like 832,000 or so minus that 300,000. You might only have around 500,000, a little over 500,000 in 0% down eligibility. But in these high cost areas, you could have a lot more. So it's important to take that into consideration. On the flip side, though, then that can work against you a bit, especially if you have no outstanding VA loans and you go buy a $2 million property, or that $2 million one that we just saw in Virginia. Now when you're PCS into North Dakota or Kansas or Texas or something like that, well, you used up all your eligibility. So there's a double-edged sword there. It can expand you if you've already got VA loans, but then it can also kind of hurt you when you're PCS into the next locations. So it's important, though, to understand that high-cost areas could impact that future VA eligibility as well. All right, next slide for us, Matt. Good deal. We hit over 30 minutes of us for everything on here. We'll make sure we check and see if we had any questions on for us. Hopefully we hit everything under the sun. That's very common for us. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat for us if you're watching this on our YouTube channel. And as well, we'll hit the next slide for us. This is where you can make sure to reach out at any time. If you need help with a VA loan, that's going to pull you right into getting started on our funnel. You work directly with me or my small team here for it. We also have Todd, who's a killer loan officer as well. We'll make sure we get you taken care of. You can get help with a real estate agent if you need that. Again, the other company that we work with often, We've Got Realty, can help you there. Use us separate, use us together, however you want. The whole goal here is to help you with military home ownership overall. And the last thing are those resources, videos like this. We've done a lot of webinars that are around regular home buying versus rent. This is like a modified version to talk about high cost areas. The master class for VA loans, talking about transitioning out of the military and using a VA loan. We've got a lot of that good stuff, all access from our wevet.com/education. My name's Evan Kaufman, again, your VA loan educator. Our team would love to help you out in the future. But either way, thanks for sticking with us and listening. Hope you have a good day. Take care.